Welcome to Jin-Gitaxias Progress Tyrant. Look at that card art. Whoa, I'm digging it. We got a little baby samurai head over there. Don't even know a word yet, but yeah, I'm digging. Welcome to Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. That is some pretty cool art. But let's go and talk about Jin-Gitaxias. So we have Jin-Gitaxias, 5 mana, double blue in the converted mana cost. Then, whenever you cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, copy that spell. You choose new targets from the copy. This ability triggers only once each turn. Then, whenever an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, counter that spell. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now, one thing to keep in mind in building this deck is that if you flicker Jin-Gitaxias, that will hit the reset button on that once per turn. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Just really kind of depends on what sort of deck you're building if you want to go for that. If you're just including it in there just to stop some extra counter stuff, I mean, you can make it work, but, you know, it just really kind of depends on how heavy you want to go on that flicker stuff. Depending on what sort of deck you're going for. But let's go and take a look as far as the creativity on a deck like this. This is completely wide open. Jin-Gitaxias does not carry any sort of support work. You know, you don't need to have enchantments out there before Jin-Gitaxias comes down. You have a fully creative deck. You can go just counterspell.deck if you want to. You can go spell slinger. You can go extra turns. You can go just good artifact creatures, get extra copies of that, some mix of both. As far as the creativity in a deck like this, it is completely wide open because Jin-Gitaxias is basically just going to give you that extra value very late in the game. Now, as far as the support in a deck like this, you know, how much of our deck is dedicated to Jin-Gitaxias, we actually don't have to have a lot of cards dedicated to making extra copies and stuff like that, but you do need a high support deck in card advantage, counter spells, mana rocks. The core foundation of a good commander deck really needs to be strong here. Our commander does cost 7 total mana, and so you really want to be deploying out some sort of mana rock almost each turn. You know, Soul Ring into Arcane Signet, into Worn Power Stone, whatever that is. You're going to need a lot of mana rocks in here to get to that 7 mana and still protect our commander. So as far as the support in a deck like this, the high support definitely needs to be in your card advantage and mana rocks and counter magic to make sure that you can protect your commander once it finally does get down. And as far as the timing goes, this is definitely not a timing is going to matter a lot with this commander. This is not something that when you get to 7 mana, you just drop down Jin-Gitaxias and kind of keep your fingers crossed that it's still going to stick around until your next turn. You want to make sure that you get it down and you can either protect it, you can get some boots on it, some lightning greaves or swiftfoot boots, have some counterspell backup, whatever that is. The timing of this commander is really going to matter because you just don't want to roll it out there and hope that it sticks around, because I promise you by the time it gets back to your turn, it's not going to be there. So really make sure that you time the placement of your commander, the casting of your commander, and at a point to where you can protect it and get a lot of extra value from it in your following turn. But yes, like I mentioned, you definitely want to run some protection in here. You don't have to run all of these in there, but you just don't want to show up to a table without lightning greaves or at least swiftfoot boots, or, you know, even if you just run this 3 protection package, that'll definitely help you out. Whatever it is, if you're going for your commander, you want to very easily and cheaply be able to try to get some protection on Jin-Gitaxias to make sure that it does stick around. Outside of the equipment stuff that you can go for, there's a lot of mono blue instants that give your creature hexproof, stuff like Dive Down, Mysium Skin, You See a Guard Approach. These are all super cheap ways that can almost just act as a 1 mana counterspell to protect your commander. So let's say you roll it out, you've only got 1 blue mana up, opponent goes for some spot removal, you go for Mysium Skin, there you go. You've got your commander protected. So now how heavy your protection package is, it's totally up to how much you're trying to make your win condition be your commander. But at the end of the day, if you're building this deck, running some variation of Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and some of these 1 mana protection spells, they're really going to help make sure that Jin-Gitaxias does stick around for you to have a lot of fun. And like I mentioned during the first part of this video, mana is going to be a very important thing to a deck like this. You need to be probably running in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 mana rocks, maybe not 10 mana rocks, but you need to have about 36. If you're trying to build just a normal version that's going to be a functioning deck, you know, not some sort of competitive commander style build, you're going to need probably around 8 mana rocks in your deck and at least 36 lands. Your commander costs a lot, and so also you want to be able to get to your commander a little bit quicker than normal than just playing 1 land drop per turn. And since we are in mono blue, it's really going to put a lot of the work on making sure that you have enough mana. Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Sky Diamond, Chromatic Lantern, more Power Stone, you get the idea. you need to make sure that you're running some high impact artifacts in here that's going to give you extra mana. That way you can get into a scenario to where, you know, you get your commander down. Maybe you spend all of your land to get your commander down. Now we can tap down Gilded Lotus to go for some sort of counter spell backup. Or if we want to at least get our commander down and maybe cast another spell in addition to our commander getting down. Whatever that is, you know, whatever sort of crazy plays you want to try to enable on your board state. If you don't have the mana to support it, you don't have that extra mana to make sure that it can happen in some really tight turns, you're going to end up with a very unfun play experience. So definitely heavily invest in your mana rocks for a deck like this. It is going to be very mana hungry. Let's talk about some of the fun stuff that you can do in this deck. And just so you know, if you're watching this video, the first part of this video is going to be kind of the big fun spells that you can go for, and the second part of the video is going to be more of the card advantage, counter spell, kind of control package for a deck like this. But yes, you know, Walk the Aeons, Expropriate, Time Stretch, these are all wonderful things that if you cast this into an open Jin-Gitaxias, it's going to give you some really nice extra turns that you can go for. Now, as far as you know, running all three of these in here, if you're just going extra turn counterspell deck, yeah, go for it. Get these three in here. If you're new to building mono blue, if you're new to building, you know, a big functioning deck like this, you don't really want to get so top heavy in your spells to where all of your extra turn spells are, you know, 6, 7, 8, you know, even more mana like that. Basically, if you have your spells, your big payoff spells, if you have a ton of them in there and they have high converted mana costs, it's really going to be hard for your deck to function getting into the late game. So if you do kind of go for spells like this, you know, pick out 2 or 3 of them. You know, have your payoff spells in your deck, but just don't have, you know, like a 10 card package that is just nothing but high converted mana cost. That's going to be very important. But yes, here's your extra turn cards. You can also run some really good stuff. Seagate Restoration. Imagine chaining Seagate Restoration into an open Jin-Gitaxias, draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand +1, then chaining that again. That's a lot of card advantage. Aminatu's Augury is going to allow you to basically look at the top 16 cards of your library. Same thing with Dig Through Time. That's going to be looking at the top 14 cards of your library. And then also with Dig Through Time, it has Delve. So, you know, let's say we do get our commander down, we delve away a lot of our graveyard. We're looking at a Dig Through Time for only 2 mana, 2 blue mana, and we're going to be able to look at the top 14 cards of our library. This is the type of stuff with like Dig Through Time. You know, I was talking about timing earlier in the video. This is something that you want to set up and be very aware of the timing of when you get your commander down, is get down Jin-Gitaxias, have an open Dig Through Time. You want to have something to do when Jin-Gitaxias comes down. You know, if you can set up a Dig Through Time, awesome. You know, it is hard to cast your commander and have 8 mana for Aminatu's Augury, but if you've got some reducers out there, whatever that may be, have some sort of follow-up plan to your commander. But yeah, something like Dig Through Time, that is going to be an absolutely wonderful way to get that done. And then also, stuff like Spell Twine, Clone Legion, Mnemonic Deluge. The cool things about these cards is these don't win the game, but when you amplify these ×2, you know, let's say you go for Clone Legion, you target one player at the table, then you get to target another player at the table. Now you have their board states. Deluge, that is an absolutely wonderful card. Exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, copy it 3 times. And so you're going to choose a new target for that, so you're going to end up with about 6 spells on the battlefield. It does have a very high converted mana cost with 9 total mana. But if you can go for Deluge, that is some fun. You've won the game right there. You may not win the game, but I promise you, if you're getting to cast 6 spells for free off of a Deluge, hey, that is a lot of fun. The same thing with Spell Twine. That's going to allow you to cast stuff out of your graveyard and your opponent's graveyards. But yes, as far as these payoff instant and sorceries, you don't want to have so many in there that if they're in your opening hand or you draw into them in the early game, that they stop your progress and they stop your ability to progress your board state as far as mana rocks and card advantage. So, you know, pick out 3 or 4 of these. You know, there's nothing wrong with having about 4 of these in your deck. That way you can at least see them at some point once you get into the late game, either in your opening hand or you draw into one of them. But if you're going to have about 10 of these cards in your deck, you're going to end up with a very top-heavy deck, and it's going to be very hard to function. So just be aware of the amount of high payoff spells that you do have in a deck like this. Alright, so we've talked about instant and sorceries getting some really good copies. Let's go and talk about artifacts. There's a lot of these out here. There's a lot of different ways that you can get extra copies of artifacts. If you just want to build some sort of mono blue ramp deck where you're just going to make a copy of Wormcoil Engine or Torrential Gearhulk or Mirror Battlesphere, the good thing about these cards is these are on curve before your commander. So let's say that, you know, because there's a lot of times where, you know, getting an extra copy of Wormcoil Engine is awesome, but if you can just get it down before you go for your commander, you've got a very sizable threat out there. Then if you can cast an wormhole engine into your commander, there's going to be 2 copies of it. That's going to be 2 more sets of tokens. You're going to be in a really good spot. But the good thing about these artifact creatures is, you know, getting to 6 mana is not that hard. We're trying to get to, you know, 7 or 8 mana for our commander. And so being able to get these down in early game and still have some sort of impact on the board state is going to be very important. You know, like I mentioned with the instant and sorcery, you just don't want to have the converted mana cost on your artifacts be so high that you have to cast them after you get your commander down. But these are all wonderful things that you can get a copy of, or if you're simply just casting them before your commander, you're going to get some pretty good value out of it. Outside of the value creatures, you do have some kind of removal style artifacts that you definitely want to incorporate in your deck. Duplicant's going to allow you to exile a creature, Spine's going to get rid of a permanent, and same thing with Meteor Golem. You know, imagine Meteor Golem doing the superhero pose as they smash some planeswalker on your opponent's side of the battlefield. These are all wonderful spells that you can cast on your own, or if you have an open commander, you know, getting in extra copies of these is just extra. It's just nice to have that extra value. Now, outside of the kind of good stuff and the removal style artifacts, you also have some kind of enablers, you know, Academy Manufacturer. Being able to get 2 of these on the battlefield and create these extra tokens, that's going to be a ton of tokens, especially if you're building some sort of treasure token deck in mono blue. Having an extra copy of Academy is going to be a wonderful thing. Same thing with Phyrexian Metamorph. You know, being able to cast this for 3 and 2 live and have 2 clones enter the battlefield, that is going to be a very good way to kind of build up your board state, and especially if it's into the late game when you're going to be able to kind of pick from your opponent's bigger threats out there. And then with Forge Master, you know, this is something that's not going to win the game, but if you have a deck that's based around you know, sacrificing artifacts, bringing stuff out of your graveyard, just having an extra copy of Forge Master is going to be a wonderful thing for you to go for. If you don't know where to take this deck and you want to have some fun, yeah, start with Forge Master. It's fun to be able to sacrifice artifacts and cheat stuff out of the deck. Outside of the kind of big payoff artifact spells, we do have some good stuff that's just good utility. You know, Phyrexian Revoker is going to allow you to lock down some planeswalkers or some problematic commanders that have an activated ability. Let's say we get our commander down and, you know, it's not the most impressive play to go for, but let's say we get a double copy of Phyrexian Revoker. That's going to be 2 ways, or 2 bodies on the battlefield that can deal with 2 activated abilities. You know, let's say we're going to close down some sort of planeswalker and close down some sort of activated enchantment, whatever that is. Being able to make an extra copy of Phyrexian Revoker is going to be pretty good too. So same thing with Spellscry. That's going to give us some protection. We can redirect some removal over there. And if you're building some sort of, you know, artifact aggro deck, you know, getting an extra copy of Master of Ethereum, get that Tribal Lord effect, and then also, you know, if you have a lot of artifacts out there, that's going to be a very sizable threat. It doesn't have trample, but, you know, if you've got 5 or 6 artifacts out there, you get 2 of these out there, they're going to give each other that bonus. You may be looking at a 6/6, a 7/7, an 8/8. You can just swing that into a board state and have a lot of fun. But yes, you know, it's nice to have the big payoff spells in here, but don't discount being, you know, getting an extra copy of something like Phyrexian Revoker. That's really going to help you out into the late game. And then we also have stuff like Sad Robot, Thought Monitor, and Pilgrim's Eye. These are all going to be your early game stuff that you're going for. And we'll talk about more what you can do with these with Jin-Gitaxias here a little bit later on. But these are things that want to help you get towards Jin-Gitaxias. But at the same time, who's going to turn down an extra copy of Sad Robot? Who's going to turn down an extra copy of Pilgrim's Eye? You know, it's not the most explosive play you can go for with your commander, but, you know, hey, getting an extra copy of these is definitely a really good way to kind of progress your board state. One of the things that you can do and really kind of amplify your board state outside of creatures is running cards like this. We have Delicate Orrery, Conjurer's Closet, Panharmonicon. Being able to get an extra copy of Panharmonicon in a enter the battlefield style build of a deck like this is a wonderful way to just get a ton of value. Same thing with Conjurer's Closet. You know, getting an extra copy of Conjurer's Closet, this can be 2 creatures you get to bounce at the end of your turn. That's going to allow you to just get a ton of enter the battlefield effects. And then also Videlican Orrery. You know, you don't really want to have like 2 of these. It's just kind of a redundant effect, but it is also a good artifact to have in the early game with Jin-Gitaxias and making sure that you can maybe flash your commander in at the end of an opponent's turn or something like that. But definitely, you know, having an extra copy of Conjurer's Closet or Panharmonicon, these are wonderful ways to really kind of make sure that once you do get into the late game, let's say you do draw into something like Sad Robot, all of a sudden that is a very explosive play when you're getting, you know, 4 or 5 or 6 lands onto the battlefield. off of a double Panharmonicon. Now, these are some of my build around artifacts that I absolutely love. These are my 3 favorite. Mirrorworks, I absolutely love this card. Whenever another non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, pay 2, create a token that's a copy of that artifact. Now, we're going to miss out on the copy effect like this, but let's say that we get down Mirrorworks and we have an extra copy of Mirrorworks. All of a sudden, we go for Wormcoil Engine. For 2 mana, we can just pay an extra copy of it. And if we have an extra Mirrorworks, that's 2 more Wormcoil Engines entering the battlefield off of something like Mirrorworks. You're already going to be building an artifact deck that cares about having a lot of mana rocks out there, heavy reliance on artifacts. Running something like Mirrorworks is a way for you to have some sort of win condition that's, not really a combo win condition, but if you get double Mirrorworks going and you've got a lot of mana, you're going to be able to flood the board with a ton of value. Mirror Turbine, it's not that impactful of an artifact, but hey, if you get 2 of them out there, you can get 2 mirrors on the battlefield a turn. Then if you're building some sort of artifact mirror deck, you can start searching up your mirrors. Mirrors aren't the best creature type out there, the tribal effect out there, but hey, it's always fun playing a mirror deck. And then Minion Reflector. Minion Reflector is kind of a backup copy for Mirrorworks. The downside to Minion Reflector is that you have to sacrifice that token whenever that creature enters the battlefield at the end of your turn. So if you do have some sort of enter the battlefield effect, you've already gotten that value from that creature. The only thing is you just have to sacrifice it. But if you're building a deck that has a ton of mana, Minion Reflector for 2 mana to have a hasty creature, that's a lot of fun, especially if you got 2 of them out there. Now, one of the ways that you can really amplify the mana in a deck like this is with KCI, with Ironworks, with Blink Moth, and an Unwinding Clock. Just having these in your deck to begin with is a wonderful way to make sure that if you want to go off on mana, if you want to bank up mana, let's say you're running some sort of artifact loop combo in the deck, having an extra copy of Ironworks is, it's a little bit redundant, but it also protects your combo. Let's say you have 2 Ironworks out there. They're going to have to deal with both of them before you start sacrificing your artifacts. Blink Moth, Urn, and Unwinding Clock, I don't know if that's a triggered ability, so you might be able to tap and untap in response to that triggered ability from both of these, but if it's not, then it's just nice to have them in the deck. So I'm not actually sure how that works if you have multiple copies of it, but if it goes on the stack and you have multiple copies, you can tap and untap in response to that. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. And last but not least, as far as the artifact support, there are a ton of legendary creatures out there that really fit on theme with artifacts. We've got Emery that's going to bring artifacts out of the graveyard. Urza is going to turn all of your untapped artifacts into blue mana and give you some sort of mana sink. Let's say that we're generating a ton of mana from something like Blink Moth Urn in the previous slide. Urza is going to allow you to shuffle your library, exile the top card, pay it without paying its mana's cost. You've got some big stuff in here, so that 5 mana may end up working out for you. And then Sai is going to give you some really nice redundancy in getting those Thopter artifact creature tokens. Let's just say we have Urza and Sai on the battlefield. So we have Sai down, we get those Thopters out there, we get down Urza. Let's say we're not attacking with the Thopters. Urza is going to allow us to tap down those Thopter creatures for blue mana. So there we go, we're ramping in that thing. And simply just having Sai and Urza out there, that gives you that interaction. So you just want to have a lot of overlapping synergy among your artifacts and the creatures that you do put into a deck like this to make sure that you have a very problematic board state for your opponents. There's also Padium and Minarch and Arkham. These are all wonderful ways that you can get card advantage with Padium. Arcs can allow you to turn stuff into artifacts and gain control of it. And then Arkham, you can sacrifice an artifact creature and then search your library for a non-creature artifact card, put it into play. So if you're going to be running Arkham, you definitely want to kind of have some sort of tutor line that you're going to go for, whether you're going for Darksteel Forge that gives all your artifacts indestructible, whatever that may be. If you're putting Arkham in there, make sure that you kind of do know what sort of tutor lines you're going to end up going for. So now that we're done talking about the fun stuff that you can do, making copies of creatures, making copies of instant or sorceries, let's talk about the foundation of your deck, and that is going to be a mono blue control style deck. You definitely want to run a high amount of card advantage in here. When you're building a deck like this, you want to be able to get card draw going cheaply and fastly. That way you can find your mana rocks, you can find counter spells, you can find what you're looking for, and that's going to start with blue strings, and that's card advantage. I would recommend probably in the neighborhood of probably around 8 pieces of card advantage. If you're building a big converted mana cost deck like this, you may have a tendency to put a lot of high impact spells in there and cut stuff like card advantage. This is really going to help make sure that you can get to the late game and have something to do in the late game. And I would definitely make sure that you have a very good card advantage foundation, and make sure you diversify it. You know, stuff like Brainstorm, Impulse, Thirst for Knowledge. You just want to be able to cheaply dig into your library, even if you're discarding cards. Now, we have talked about building a deck that has a lot of mana, and you definitely want to run the X tap out draw spells. Pull from Tomorrow, Stroke of Genius, Drown in Dreams. What these do is they almost they're going to put your opponents in a position to where, let's say you're finally at a spot to where we can cast our commander. Alright, so before at the end of your previous opponent's turn, you tap out for a full Pull from Tomorrow. Let's say we're tapping down double blue and tapping down X equals 6. So now we're going to be drawing 6 cards before we start our turn. So this is a great way that before you start your turn, you can go for something like Pull from Tomorrow with all that extra mana, present an opportunity to the board, be like, hey, do you want to counter this? Anything y'all want to do to stop me before I draw 6 cards? And then if somebody's going to stop it, then that kind of helps clear the way for you to end up going for your commander. In a mana deck like this that has access to a lot of mana, these are the ways that when you've burned your card advantage early game and you've already ramped, these are the ways that get you right back in the game. That way you can keep getting threats out on your opponent, or let's say that you finally do, you know, simply just getting an extra copy of this with your commander. You know, Pull from Tomorrow for 6 and then an extra copy that's going to be twice the card draw. These are great ways to either set yourself up to get your commander down, or to have a big payoff spell. You don't have to have a big extra turn card to win with your commander. Simply just going Pull from Tomorrow extra 6 times 2. That's one way that you can definitely kind of close the game out. Outside of card advantage, you definitely want to run counter spells. You're in mono blue, counter spells is the strength of the deck. If you're building a mono green deck, you would put ramp in there because that is the strength of green. Build a counter spell package in a deck like this, and make sure you have some diversity in your counter spells. Something like Arcane Denials can be a great universal counter spell for early game threats. This going to allow you to counter spell an activated ability or a triggered ability. That's going to allow you to stop a planeswalker from going for an ultimate, whatever that may be. And even little things like Neutralize. You know, it is just a counter spell, but it has cycling for 2. So let's say that we do have, you know, we've got 2 or 3 counter spells in our hand. We can cycle Neutralize away to go for some card advantage. Have some diversity in your counter spells. Don't just jam all your counter spells at converted mana cost 3 from all your draft decks. Kind of playing out your counter spells. You know, you're probably looking in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 counter spells in a deck like this, just to make sure that you can protect your commander and protect threats from entering the battlefield. You also want to use some of the free counter spells. Now, these are very expensive. These can be very expensive, and if you're thinking about putting this in a deck like this and you don't have access to it, you don't want to buy them, get a placeholder. You know, see if these do work out. That way you can see how cheaply these free spells are. There's a lot of times where you want to protect your commander once we get it down, but let's say that we don't have the mana to leave up counter magic. So let's say we have something like Pact of Negation. So we tap out for our commander. Your opponent's going to think that the coast is clear, and then you can go for something like Pact of Negation to counter that spell, and then pay that mana during your upkeep. We just cast our commander, so paying that 5 mana during our next upkeep won't really be that bad. But yes, having free counter spells in a deck that has a commander with a high converted mana cost, this is a great way to protect your commander while your resources are almost depleted trying to get your commander out there. So run some of these in there. They are expensive, so test them out, and you'll see how nice it is to have it in a deck like this. And of course, you're in mono blue, you want some sort of board control. You want to have, you know, let your opponents build up the board states between turn 1 and turn 6, somewhere in there. Go for something like an evacuation. Send everything back to the hand. Create a problem for your opponents, because if you send everything back, either you're going to get an answer from somebody else at the table, or your opponent's going to have to spend their next turn rebuilding, which is going to be a great time for you to get our commander down. So you want to have some sort of way to interact with the board before we go for Jin-Gitaxias, and this is going to be a great way to make sure you can just kind of hit the reset button and create a problem for your opponents. Outside of the kind of mono blue control shell, you definitely want to incorporate some sort of planeswalkers in here. One of the things why it's important to have planeswalkers in a deck like this is these are problems for our opponent. We get down Tezzeret Artifice Master, that's going to put them in a spot to where, you know, we're not going to win the game with that ultimate. We can go for the ultimate, but really with Tezzeret Artifice Master, we're going for that zero ability. We want to get that card advantage going. And so by getting down Tezzeret first before we get our commander down, your opponents are going to spend resources trying to get rid of Tezzeret, to get rid of that card draw ability. Same thing with Tezzeret the Seeker. We're going to have that tutor ability. We can go for that that -5 to turn all of our artifacts into 5/5 creatures, or simply just having that +1 to untap the artifacts turn after turn, your opponents aren't going to like these planeswalkers out there, so they're going to try to get rid of them, which is hopefully going to deplete answers out of their hand for Jin-Gitaxias, which is going to be very important. And also, we have a brand new Tyrant to add to a deck like this. We're going to get a reduced activated ability cost of an artifact that we can draw 2 less, and then the +1, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact. In a deck like this, having that loot effect for 2, that's perfectly fine, because we're looking for specific things, either counter spells or card advantage, and just looting through your deck's a great way to go for that. And to be perfectly honest, getting to that -6 on this brand new Tezeret is not that hard at all. So we get down Tezeret, we plus up 1 turn, so you're looking at 3 more turns later before you go for the ultimate. Whenever you tap an artifact and draw a card, that's not going to win you the game right then and there. But if you just have any artifact to be able to tap down for card draw, it's not that crazy that you may be tapping down for 6 or 7 card draw per turn, and you can do it on your opponent's turn to get rid of the max hand size clause if you don't have that built into your deck. So running some of these Tezerets in here give you some sort of win condition that's not going to immediately win you the game, but it's going to be a problem for your opponent, which is going to hopefully get resources out of their hand. Outside of Tezeret, things like Karn, with the activated ability of artifacts, Karn shutting those down, that has a huge impact on the game and makes sure that you can only use your rocks to ramp. Karn will be a target at the table as soon as it comes down, so they're going to get rid of those removal spells, or at least try to counter it. Once again, clearing the way for our commander. Karn's going to get the Karn Scion of Urza is going to get the construct tokens on the battlefield, just kind of gives you an alternative plan to get some beater artifact construct tokens if you want to. And then same thing with Teferi, you know, you're going to be able to activate Teferi turn after turn. And so once again, with these planeswalkers, you want something that's a problem. You want your opponent to do something about these planeswalkers. That way it's going to clear the way to get our commander down. One of the other ways outside of planeswalkers is to run some sort of spell slinger package. This is going to give you something to do in the early game and hopefully build up a lot of value on your board state. Riddlesmith and Videlican Archmage, whenever you cast an artifact spell, you're going to get that card draw. You're going to loot with Riddlesmith, but with Archmage, that's going to be just a straight card draw. So if you have a lot of artifacts, or you have ways to return artifacts back to your hand, that's going to be a great way to really kind of increase that value that you're generating on your board state. And then even something as simple as Mishra's Self-Replicator. Whenever you cast a historic spell, pay 1, create a token that's a copy of it. If you don't know what a historic spell, it's an artifact, legendary, saga. So if you're running any of the legendary artifact support commanders in here, if you're running any artifacts in here, which we certainly are, you're going to be able to end up kind of build this weird 1 mana 2/2 army. You know, it may not win you the game, but if you can just get all these self-replicators out there and keep making more and more copies each time you cast an artifact, hey, that's a great way to kind of build the board state, especially if you're not finding some of your late game threats. Same thing with the kind of casting of artifacts. We have Mirrored and Besiege, Efficient Construction, Thopter Spy Network. These all basically just give you a Thopter if you're going for an artifact in some form or fashion. So if you really want to kind of lean into that Thopter, if you want to get as many artifacts on the battlefield as possible, some of these enchantments are great to get down in the early game and really kind of help build up that board state towards the end. Like I did mention, we're running a lot of card advantage, which are instant or sorceries, and we're running a lot of counters magic, which is instant or sorcery. And so running some sort of spell slinger package in a deck like this is going to give you that extra value in the early game to help protect you into the late game. So Poppet Stitcher, Archmage, Tyrant, we're going to be getting those 2/2 Drakes entering the battlefield with Tyrant. Poppet Stitcher is going to be giving some of those black zombie tokens, and then once again Archmage is going to be giving some just straight card draw off of an instant or sorcery. Once again, like the Planeswalkers, these are problems on the board. They're just going to keep generating value over and over and over again, and so your opponents are going to want to deal with these threats, which hopefully should clear the way for Jin-Gitaxias. But that's going to be it for the deck tech. I don't have a deck list down there right now, but I do have all of the cards in this slide in a free-form link down below on the TCG link, so be sure to check it out. If you're thinking about building this commander in a way that I didn't describe, hop in the comments and let me know. I like to read them, and also people who are researching this commander can see the comments and get some different play ideas. But I'm very excited about this commander, and it does seem like a scary commander. There may be some play groups that don't want to play against it, but you can totally build this in just a huge mana way that's not going to be that oppressive to your opponents at the table, but at the same time allow you to have some fun without completely shutting everybody down. But that is going to be it for the deck tech. In fact, if you enjoyed it, hey, like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.